morning, this is the Megan house. I'm going to be making Palestinian lentils and rice topped with crispy onions. So as you can see, I've gotten all my ingredients ready and the equipment that I'm going to need for it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is get started slicing my onions, and for that you want to make sure that you have equal slices so that way they cook all at the same time. So for that, we're going to use a slicing knife. We will cut the onion in half. And then we can cut off the edge. And this will allow us to peel the onion. So once you have your onion peeled, you're gonna cut it like so. Then you can turn it so it's stable. And then you're gonna use your fingers to kind of estimate how thick you want them to be cut. So you use your knuckle so that way you don't risk cutting your finger. And this will be kind of the size that we're going to try and get. This way we're looking at onions that are all close to the same size. We want to make sure that they're separated so that way they cook thoroughly. We want them to get nice and crispy and brown. And that's kind of like an example of how they're going to look when you add them to the pan. So I'm going to go ahead and finish slicing up my onions, and then I'm going to get the olive oil going, warming up in the pot. So okay, now I have all of my onions sliced up, so I'm going to go ahead and get my olive oil going and warming up. So I'm going to set the heat to like a high to medium heat, and we need half a cup of olive oil. So we're going to add that really quickly. No, it seems like a lot, but we are going to be using this pan for everything. So we'll let that warm up a bit before we add the onions. I probably should have gone over all the ingredients we're going to be using today. So as you can see over here, well, you saw the onions. We have the basmati rice that we're going to be using. So what I will do after I get my onions in and they're sauteing, I'm going to get 1 cup of rice. I'm going to put it in the larger measuring cup so that way I have a little bit of room to rinse it a few times just to get the extra starch off. And then I will also get my 1 cup of lentils ready to go. These ones do not need to be pre-soaked. They are ready to go. Also, when they're in the water for the 30 minutes towards the end of the video, that's when they're going to be doing their cooking. And then this recipe uses cumin, salt, and black pepper. So it's a fairly simple recipe, but those are the ingredients that we're going to be using. So I want to check real quick on this. I'm going to let it warm up a bit more, and then I'll be adding in my onions to get them nice and crispy, because that's what's going to go on top of the dish at the end. Alright, so our oil is good and hot now, so I'm going to turn the heat down to a medium heat, and I'm going to go ahead and add the onions. I'm going to stir those around so they can all get nice and coated so nothing sticks. And then we're going to stir this frequently over the next probably about 15 minutes to make sure that this gets nice and crispy. Again, this is what goes on top, so it's going to add a lot of flavor to the dish. I'm using a slotted spoon for this so that way when I go to take the onions out of the pan, I can leave the oil in there for the lentils and the rice. So while that's getting cooked, sauteed, I'm going to go ahead and add my rice to my large measuring cup. Alright, so I have my 1 cup of rice measured out, so I'm going to rinse it. That will get rid of some of the excess starch. So I'm just going to add some water stir it up. And then I'm going to use a screen to drain the rice. Then I'm going to do this 2 or 3 times just to make sure we get rid of all that excess starch, just so that way it doesn't affect the taste of the final dish. We got some water in there, stir it up. You can see that the water is cloudy, so that's how you know that there's some starch coming off of the rice. So we will drain it again. We're doing this again while our onions are over there sauteing, because that's going to take about 15 minutes, so we can be proactive and get some other stuff done in the meantime. Alright, so this will be our last time rinsing the rice, so we just want to make sure we give it a good stir. And we drain it really well. Some water is left in the measuring cup. That's okay, because we're going to be adding water to the pot anyway, so it's not a big deal. So that's all done. We can bring it back over here so we have it accessible. We want to make sure we're stirring our onions up. And then while we're also waiting, we'll go ahead and get our lentils measured out. Okay, so the onions have been cooking now or sauteing now for about 15 minutes. You will notice though they're not as brown as I would like them to be, but that's because of the material of the pot. It does not tend to brown up really well, but you can see that the onions are cooked because they kind of have the clear look to them. So we're going to take them out and put it on the paper towel lined plate. You want to make sure, this is where the slotted spoon comes in handy, because you can see all the oil kind of dripping back down, because we're going to need it when we add in the rice and the lentils to saute them for a bit before we add the water. So we want to add these onto the paper towel so they can still continue to drain while the rest of the meal is cooking. So I'll go ahead and get those all out now. So feel free to kind of do what you need to do to angle or make it easier to get the onions out and leave the majority of the oil in. So you can see they're soft, they're cooked through, they are browning up a little bit. They're very fragrant though, so that will add to the appeal of the dish. Now we got the majority of the onions out. We can go ahead and add in the rice that we rinsed. So again, that was 1 cup. And we are going to saute this a bit. We'll just leave that rice in there. Not a big deal. We can see that that rice is already starting to brown up. And then, excuse me, Jordan, I'm going to add in the lentils as well. So we're going to saute this for a few minutes before we add the water. And while this is sauteing, I'm going to go ahead and add the cumin and the salt and the pepper, so that can get a little flavorful. So I have 1 teaspoon. It's 1 teaspoon of each ingredient, which makes it very easy for us. So, and of course you can play with the recipe a little bit. If you like cumin a little bit more, add a little bit extra. You want a little extra black pepper. So you level that off. I'm going to go ahead and add that. Add my salt. And we have some pepper. Everybody has their own taste, so remember, feel free to add or maybe take a little bit away if you're not a huge pepper person. It will take away from some of the flavor of the dish. So just remember that. And now we're gonna stir this up. We'll let this saute for just a few minutes, 3 to 5 minutes. Get some flavors going, let the seasonings cook a bit. And while the onions were cooking, I had a chance to get my 3 cups of water ready. So that's ready to go. So that's why keeping the oil in the pot was necessary, because we still had to add all of this, and we don't want this to stick to the bottom. Alright, so this has been sauteing for about 5 minutes now. You can see that the cumin is spread all over the black pepper, the salt. It smells delicious already. So now we are going to add 3 cups of water. We'll wait for this to come to a boil, and then we are going to lower the temperature and let it cook at a very low temperature for about 25 to 30 minutes. And then we just want to make sure that the rice is cooked through and the lentils are cooked through. They are hard to begin with, so if they're not cooked through, it will definitely affect the texture of your final dish. While this is cooking, we leave our onions set to the side so that way they can continue to drain. Not a big deal at all. And we are gonna wait for this to boil, and we'll be right back. All right, so we got our water boiling now. You can take a look. You can see that there's bubbles everywhere, not just around the edges when it simmers. And then you can take a look at the liquid that's in here, the water, so you can see that the seasonings are all over. And the lentils and the rice are already starting to expand. So what we'll do now is we will put the lid on. We'll make sure it's good and tight, which you can see it immediately steamed up. Great sign. And we're gonna turn the heat down to low. And we're just gonna let this cook on low for the next 25, 30 minutes. Then we'll check it and make sure everything's done. And I will show you what the final product should look like. Thank you. All right, so we're back, and the dish has been cooking now for about 30 minutes. I did want to mention that hand washing, even when you're cooking at home, is very important. You haven't seen me do it on the video. I've been doing it in between takes, but I did want to make sure I made a point to let you know that that is still very important. All right, let's check this out. So I'm going to turn off the heat. I'm gonna fluff up the rice and the lentils a bit. So there's not very much, you can see there's not very much liquid in here, which is a good sign. It means it's all been soaked in and cooked. Smells delicious. All right, so I have a plate here ready for the last part of the dish. So we will add a bit of the lentils and rice. I mean, you put however much you want to make per serving. I'm going to be giving this to my son, and he's going to be trying it. And he's 13, so I don't know how much he's going to actually eat. Let me grab a fork really quick, in which I forgot. Add some onions here to the top for him. And that is what the dish should look like. So you have your rice and your lentils that are seasoned and have been cooking for about 30 minutes. And then you have your onions on top that will add a bit of flavor. And we will see how he likes this. All right, so the camera has switched sides now, and I have Jordan, who has been doing the filming for me, trying this dish. Again, he's 13 and taking the time away from playing his video game on this awesome Sunday to record for me. How is it, Jordan?
Pretty good.
All right, well, there you have it. 13-year-old who enjoys the Palestinian dish, rice and lentils topped with onions.